I expected sobriety to feel like the right amount of booze, and that really took me a while to understand. Inspiration is, the inhalation of spirits. Like there's just the language that moves across the divide between booze and God is like so close.
Welcome to the Daily Reflection Podcast with your hosts Michael L. and Lee M. This is a show where we strive to provide inspiration through interviews with members of the recovery community, sharing their experience, strength, and hope through the lens of an inspirational passage from recovery literature. We are not aligned with any 12-step recovery program, but you will hear them mentioned throughout the course of an interview. Welcome to the show for February 10th. Our guest today is Whit M. from Philadelphia. Such a powerful message of recovery and such a pleasure to talk to. I know Lee and I really enjoyed it. Before we get to the show, we'd love to ask for your help. If you could give us a rating, a review, or a comment, subscribe to the podcast. That would really help us out. It'll help to get the message out there. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Good morning, Mike. It's February 10th. How are you this morning?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's good to see you again, Lee. What's on the schedule for today?
Well, we have a great guest this morning. We've got Whit M. from Center City, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, here to talk to us about the Daily Reflection. I don't run the show.
Terrific. Whit, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you very much.
It's great to have you on the show. Whit, we usually get things started by having the guest read the Daily Reflection for the day. Would you get us started?
I can certainly do that. It's February 10th, and the title is I Don't Run the Show. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? Alcoholics Anonymous, page 53. Today, my choice is God. He is everything. For this, I am truly grateful. When I think I am running the show, I'm blocking God from my life. I pray I can remember this when I allow myself to get caught up into self. The most important thing is that today I'm willing to grow along spiritual lines and that God is everything. When I was trying to quit drinking on my own, it never worked. With God and AA, it is working. This seems to be a simple thought for a complicated alcoholic.
So, Whit, did you try to stop drinking on your own?
Yeah, like I was great at stopping drinking. I did it like a million times. I couldn't stay stopped, and I've heard that a lot in the rooms. And that was, I had no idea what anything that wasn't wit powered, what that meant. And so it took me a while to kind of catch on to that. And, it was the, stopping one day and then the next day and the next day that became the issue for me. And I gave it a whirl without AA, and then found that really there were big gaps missing in my life. And I had friends, and I was kind of the drunk guy that people who were looking for ways to stop drinking came to. I don't know why that was. I knew a lot about drinking, and my family had some of drinkers in it. So I kind of was aware of alcoholism from a relatively early age. But when it came time for me to stop, I didn't need this thing, but I could tell you, like, what you need to do is go to AA. And so finally, the fickle finger of fate was pointing back at me, and I realized I kind of needed to go, investigate some non-wit solutions to living. I have to say too that I grew up thinking, pretty in love with booze. With me, it wasn't it was a thing of beauty. I have to say, like, I was in love with alcohol. I was in love with just about everything about it. Its taste, its effects, for sure, where it was kept, the light that came through the bottles. It all was like a gorgeous to me. And I knew that at a certain point in my life, I would be able to do that thing that my dad did, that my grandfather did, and I was going to be a drinking man. And so that was kind of like, that took me some time to get away from, and also to understand that I had made some kind of transition from the drinking man into the alcoholic, and it took me a while to recognize those signs, other than the fact that like I felt like hell and couldn't keep doing it, but I needed people to show me the way and guide me into the rooms, and that eventually happened.
So how old were you when you first started drinking, and how old were you when you got sober?
Oh, well, let's see. I was, I think, 6 when I discovered alcohol. I was at a friend's house, and he showed me some like an ice tray full of frozen cider, hard cider, and he gave me one, and he took one, and we sucked on that, and out we went to play. And a little later, I had to go to the bathroom, so I went into the house and took another cube and went back out to play, and then had to go to the bathroom again. And I think I finished off that tray of hard cider, and I loved it so much. And it's like, wow, I was happy, I was laughing, playing was just awesome. And it didn't take off there, but like I do remember early years, just not able to wait for Christmas, because that meant with the family I was going to be a member of the club, and they were going to let me do. And my dad was great at like ushering me into the drinking guy protocols, and so I did learn that fairly quickly. It wasn't until I got into college, though, that I began to realize that everything I was missing in life seemed to be there for me when I drank. And it was very persuasive. And I got drunk the first time I went out and drank. I was the life of the party, whereas usually I was very shy. And over time, found a kind of drinking way of life that I developed in college, but didn't really get going until I was out of college.
I can relate to so much of your story, even the drinking at an early age part. It's interesting just how it gets introduced to us, and it becomes this thing that we want to do because it's so wonderful and changes us. But in the daily reflection, it says, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis that we couldn't postpone or evade, then we had to fearlessly face the proposition. So what was that like for you?
Well, a lot of times when I qualify, it took me a long time to sort of piece my story together, because I drove drunk any number of times, never got a DUI, worked drunk many times, and lost one job for drinking. I was in a field where alcohol use was kind of the way you did things. I was an actor on the stage, and for many years, and bartended to support myself in between gigs, and so it was kind of like it was like a way of life that you could participate in. Just so long as you showed up on time, everything was cool. But so when I started to feel like I had a problem, it wasn't because I had been in jail. It wasn't because everybody in my life hated my guts. It was because I just was empty. I was running on empty, and I didn't know how to fix it. I had always grown up. I had grown up reading, great literature and great plays, and so I had this sense that there was something out there that was worth pursuing, a kind of knowledge of the ages, and I had no access to it because I was hanging out with people that basically accepted my lying as okay. I was super egoistic and loved to strut. When I got drunk, all my social problems seemed to disappear, and yet things weren't going well, and I just was at a loss to explain why. So as my story developed after getting sober, I had to really dig down because I didn't identify with a lot of the drunkalogs I heard. It took me a long time to sort of understand what my alcoholism had done to me and what I had inherited and how I was going to find my way. It also meant that I took recovery really super slowly. It wasn't like I wasn't a house on fire. And even sober, I went on 12-step calls and with friends, and I saw what alcohol did to people, and I saw what what was waiting for me out there if I hadn't been a high bottom. And that part of my recovery was hugely important to me. The knowledge that came to me because I was with you people and because I began to identify more and more. I got sober in 1985. And so that means I have 35 years of sobriety. I have had to learn that, somewhere in there, I crossed the threshold in sobriety. Whereas if I had been drinking all that time, I have a very clear thought that I would have been dead at a certain point. But that point never arrived drinking. It sort of came to me sober. So, things like God is everything, God is nothing, that phrase in the book kind of scared the hell out of me. It seemed so absolute. And for a guy who was, struggling with aspects of his story, I got sober in a rural area, and the stuff I saw other people do, and I was like, oh my God, this thing is so real and so serious. But for a while, I identified out because of the way my bottom had kind of worked. My bottom came because I was, this is going to sound weird, but I was in a performance of, we call it the Scottish play. It's a performance play by William Shakespeare called Macbeth. And I was playing the title character, and I had put a trash can off stage so that when I made an exit, I could hover over the trash can in case I needed to throw up, and then I would be able to re-enter the stage. I was hovering over this trash can, and one of my fellow actors who was in the program came up to me and she said, I know exactly how you feel, and I have absolutely no sympathy. And that just kicked me in the chest. And at that point, I knew I had to take some action because I was not going to be able to sustain my level of activity, et cetera. So, now I'm a theater director. I'm no longer an actor. So when it says you don't run the show, I am that guy that says in the book, we're like stage directors. If we could just control the lights, the sound, all the other people, everything would be great. Literally, that is my profession. And so control issues of ego, my desire to compete with other people's bottoms. I've never heard anybody say that before, but I've experienced that where I hear other people's bottoms and I go, God, if only I had gone that long all of my pain would be gone, because I would know with certainty something that I've had to learn. It's like alcohol for me was like uh, the, I would get to the right point and all my troubles would disappear. It was so reliable for a long time, where the right amount of alcohol would render me great, and my brain felt good. My mouth worked right. I was handsome, and I knew what to say to people. And so from that point on in sobriety, I expected sobriety to feel like the right amount of booze. And that really took me a while to understand that the way that sobriety works is not like the boom of alcohol, when the drink hits your stomach and everything's made okay. It's taken me literally 33 of those 35 years to come to a point where my level of sobriety, my level of serenity equals what I felt when I drank.
I'm listening to the sound of this landing on just a ton of people listening right now, because what you're saying is you're expecting sobriety to feel as good, as suddenly, and as powerfully as the drink did.
Right.
But it took you a while.
I was so in love with that feeling. I one time heard a guy tell a story about being in marketing, and he got an account for some vodka, and he went, to devise the marketing campaign for this vodka, and he said, this vodka, I don't know, whatever the name of the vodka was, it goes boom. And he went out to the, to pitch this idea to everybody else, and they were like, we have no idea what you're talking about. But for me, like the drug of choice went boom, and it just landed in my body. Like literally, it's 35 years later, I have not had a drink, and as I said that, I felt that feeling coursing through my body. I could feel the excitement and the pleasure of that boom. And that was God to me. That was like the spiritual awakening that I experienced when I first started to drink, and when I first started to, be an artist. Those two things together, that they went hand in hand. This is maybe a little strange, but the god Dionysus, the god of wine, is also the god of theater. And I never quite understood that. It was like the ability for us to experience ecstasy is built into our systems. And many of us just go overboard in pursuit of that. The slow way, the spiritual way, has meant everything to me. God is either everything or he is nothing. I totally believe that's true. I've come to believe that. And for me today, and God is everything. And that's like physics. That's like, the universe and everything in it. That's God for me. And that has, my problem was not having trouble believing that God is everything. It was, what do I do with that thought?
So I'm sitting here thinking, the description of the vodka and the experience of when the drug of choice hit, so deeply related to that. And up until this moment, I hadn't really given it this thought, but maybe that's God too. Maybe that's, for many of us, that's how God works. I mean, I don't want to say God.
That's one that. Well, my thank you for saying that. I wouldn't know. Inspiration is the inhalation of spirits, like there's just the language that moves across the divide between booze and God is like so close. And I don't know if people who have other kinds of addictions feel that same thing, but for me, what has grown in AA is my ability to understand what my part in that is. There's an old Islamic saying that goes like this, that I think of when I think of this. It's like, trust God, but tie up your camel. And like, what does that mean? Like, God is either everything or he's nothing, but like, trust God, but tie up your camel. So how do I tie up my camel every day? And that's been like what the steps have done for me. Over the years, what I've come to understand is what my role can be in all of the steps. I have to come to believe, and I have to then embark on this journey of the 12 steps. And it is a journey. It's like, if I ever wanted to feel the wisdom of the ages, for me, the 12 steps have been the avenue to that. And partly because they're so practical. They're tying up your camel. I mean, it's just, you just have to know the right knot, and you have to know like which tree to tie it to. So, apart from that, like step 4 and 5, I get to see what's holding me to, down. And step 6 and 7, I toss that out, and I sort of just get rid of it. That's I have to become willing to do that. And once I do, I trust God to fill those spaces with something else. And that's the miracle for me. It's like I have to put myself in a situation where if I throw this bad stuff out, that there's something waiting there to come in. And that's, if I'm in a room of AA and I have another alcoholic to help, and I have the literature, and I have what people share at meetings, and I have this kind of opportunity, that's what's going to flow in. That's what is going to take over. And so there's a miracle that happens, but it's like my job is to do the 6 and 7, and then to go on to 8 and 9, and then repeat, put it on repeat. And I guess I'll share this. This is a little something I wouldn't share at a meeting necessarily, but I got shot in a street shooting in 2018, and I was just walking home from work, and it was just dark. It was in January 2018, and so I walked down the street. A guy came up to me on his bicycle, and he was not a young man. And he produced a gun, and I was like, oh, okay. And when you realize you're in this situation, it's a very rude awakening. And long story short, I ended up fighting with the guy, like physically, and kicked him, and he went down, and I picked up his bike and I was going to throw it at him. I don't know what I was doing. I was just on kind of autopilot. And the weird thing was the fight was something that had come into my body when I was a younger man. I had taken a stage combat class. And what happened when I got into this situation is this stage combat class took over. I had never studied self-defense. I just studied how to fake fight. And so I fake fighted, but made contact. I fake fought, and down he went. And then I heard this sound, and I was shot. Like, as a result of that, a lot of things happened. I had a mini stroke, and I lost my profession for a while, and I was in AA, but like I hadn't been going to meetings. I have a family that I got because of AA, and I had been estranged from the rooms for wasn't drinking, but when I got shot, I realized I needed AA full force. And so I found a new sponsor who had half my sobriety, and this guy really set me straight. And I found myself describing to him something that I been experiencing for 45 years, sober. And for some reason, the program hadn't gotten to this thing, whatever this thing I'm going to explain. And I told him about it, and he said, "You need outside help." And I discovered this because of the PTSD following the shooting. And as a result, I was able to get funding for my therapy through a victim compensation fund at the state level. And otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to afford it really, and found my way through the rooms, through people I knew, to a particular therapist. And it turned out I had been suffering for like 45 years with a mental illness that was in addition to my alcoholism, that the alcohol had sort of helped me to understand, or it mitigated it. And then, once I stopped drinking, there was nothing happening with it. It just sat there. So like, what I'm trying to say is 33 years sober, I got shot, had PTSD, found my way into therapy, found the right therapist through a new sponsor who had, like half the time I had. And as a result, it's now about 2 years later. And because of that shooting, I now feel a level of serenity that I never thought was possible for me. All I can say is, to anyone out there who is working sober on whatever it is that's at the core, you will find the answer if you stay sober. So like in this case, God is everything. I was given the tools through the 12 steps to go on a discovery mission, 33 years sober, that has led me to my 35th year sober, better than I've ever been. A major leap forward in my insights. And if I hadn't stayed sober that whole period of time, struggling off and on, I wouldn't have found this thing. And if I hadn't gotten shot, I wouldn't have found it. So it's like, what is this thing living? What is living? I don't know. It's like in AA, I have some kind of, or in recovery, I have some chance of finding my way to a power greater than myself. And honestly, I'm very moved being able to talk about this. As I said, I wouldn't share this in a meeting for the most part, but I have realized that, I might have something to offer people who are suffering in other ways as well, and that go hand in hand with alcoholism. I'm so happy. I'm not happy I got shot. My wife had cancer too. And I'm telling you, nobody wants that shit to happen. But in AA, I have the tools to know, and God is everything. I just couldn't get to it. I had no idea. Like, I would say to people, what I want is like to be like Moses and have God come and ask me out to lunch, and we would sit there and people would say, I don't think you really want that. It was hard for Moses. It's like, you don't want to have lunch with God. And if you did, you probably would say, hey, why don't you pick up the check? I got to be going. It's really true. Like, the boom of spiritual development is not like the same thing. It's not like alcohol. It's like it's a trudge at times. I don't know why this has happened for me, and I can, I have gotten to experience firsthand, but largely secondhand, what extreme chronic alcoholism can do to the human body, to the human psyche, to lives destroyed. My life wasn't destroyed at that level, but that doesn't mean I don't belong in AA. So when it says, you don't run the show, all I can say is, yeah, it's like, I now know for sure that I don't run the show. And I'm happy to say that. I'm working with a couple of newcomers now that are eating my lunch. The thing people say in their third day of sobriety are just amazing to me. Like, oh yeah, it's like, I want to stay sober. I want the craving to leave me. I think I need to get this craving to go away before I can stay sober. I'm like, no, dude, that's not how it works. The craving doesn't go away in order for you to stay sober. That's the whole problem, is that the only way the craving goes away is if you want to stay sober. And then over time, I still crave a drink on occasion. Not very often I say that, but I don't really know if I mean that. I crave escape. I know now that I can escape. If I'm lying there awake in my bed and can't sleep, my escape is a contemplation of a power greater than myself. And I can back out of whatever horrible place I'm in and go down into that place. And that's where I find so much solace now, and so much beauty. Beauty is important. It's important to me, and sobriety has brought beauty into my life.
Well, that's beautiful. I'm thinking about all of the things that you've been through, and the fact that God is everything and everywhere. And I love what you said. I mean, these are not things that we would write into the book of our lives if we had a choice, but at the same time, what a beautiful outcome.
Yeah, that's well said. There are days when I will walk into a meeting and, I've got some kind of issue on my mind. And what I don't know, and what I still don't know, 35 years of doing this, sometimes it's the person who's just going to talk about the booze or the drug, whatever it is, the behavior, I gotta stop this. That is like the message of that simple need is like the thing that rockets me into another place. And I feel my whole body, relax. And I can smell different alcohols. Like right now I can conjure how it's just so built into me that it will no one will take that part of my brain out. So I got to hear other people talk about their need to drink in order for me to have a decent day.
So that sounds like a strong need for fellowship and the program. What's that look like for you today?
Man, I grew up with the best education my parents could afford. And I loved school. I loved learning. And what I found in AA and through recovery is that I don't have to find people like me to get that wisdom of the ages from them. Like, I don't want this to sound weird, but like, you never know if a person actually knows how to read or not. And in AA, I've learned that the person who doesn't know how to read can give me precisely the thing that is the deepest, wisest thing that I am capable of hearing that day. So like, life isn't at all what I thought it was. And I can't recommend that highly enough. I often find myself trying to help people who kind of have upbringings like mine and educations like mine, and it ain't a blessing in AA. It's not a blessing to feel that degree of education sometimes, because you're just looking at an AA room going like, what do I have in common with these folks? And that's what fellowship has given me, is not just access to my own recovery, but to other people's recoveries. And so fellowship, it's like there's love there. And the love of AA for me also has taken a long time for me to understand, because I'll be 100% honest. I thought I was better than you people. And like must have been about 20 years ago, I finally shared that at a meeting. And I cried, because I had gone so long in AA trying to get this thing. And part of it was just, I needed humility. I needed the ability to kind of look around me and see the world differently than I thought it was, so that's what fellowship means to me. And service, like there's so many, like I didn't know till I came to Philly that there were so many ways to do service. And so I feel a kind of responsibility to guide people in whatever way I can to the appropriate service opportunities. Sometimes that's, the proverbial ashtrays, but sometimes it's also like, how about you escort this doc, this medical student? And like what I get from that is, the knowledge like that, I'm not working with I'm working, indirectly with the alcoholic who still suffers, but it's like the knowledge that if I can turn this doc on to some of what's going on here, that's a lifetime of people that they can head towards the rooms. And so, that feels really crucial to me. And that kind of thing, if you like talking to medical students, and you don't have to have a medical degree to do that, it's just a great thing. And that's another kind of service that I've enjoyed. So I feel responsible to try to up the ante in terms of what actually constitutes service with the people I know.
I relate.
And did I answer your question, Mike?
Yes, you did. It was great. It was great. And, thank you for your service. That is high impact. That's high impact service. I'm familiar with the CPC, the cooperation with the professional community, and I'll include a link to the Philadelphia area. I'm sure there are many around the planet that do similar things, but it's a really powerful way to get in service. If you're interested, take a look at the show notes.
Talk a little bit about the many students that if we could expand our CPC capabilities, we'd be, if we could cover, a much larger portion of the, docs need this. I've been to so many docs who like, why are you still going to those meetings? Like you're 7 years sober. Why are you still going to AA meetings? I'm like, I don't think you get it.
Well, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your amazingly powerful story. Lee, anything else before we wrap?
No, just a beautiful story. Thank you so much for showing up as authentically as you do. And I think you've helped a lot of people here today. So thank you.
Thanks, Whit.
Thanks for asking me.
Special thanks to Whit for joining us today. Thanks to all of you for listening. Remember to subscribe, and if you could give us a rating or a review, leave a comment. That would really help us out. You can find us online at blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/dailyreflectionpodcast. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.